What's going on, birdies? Flute tooths birds. Looks like we're going to talk about some Greek myth today. It's been on my mind just because, it seems relevant. Truly. How many of you are just into theology in general? That used to be theology. I'm not a proponent of polytheism or that stuff, but, things inspired by spirit tend to be disguised. Sometimes people find new ways to express spirit, new ways to share that knowledge. And the ways they once used just become part of a bygone era myth. So what I'm getting at is there's a spiritual center to it. Not the many gods part, but the chase, the internal battles that they faced. It reminded me a lot of, for example, the Book of Lamentations. Greek myth can teach us a lot about ourselves. We can learn from the mistakes of others. But first, I got the cold steel code 4. I'm gonna go ahead and assemble it. Had to clean it, had sand in it. What's going on? So, like I said, that's an old anthology of Greek drama by, edited by C.A. Robinson Jr. It's pretty good. And like I said, I had to put this back together because I had sand in it. But man, look at this. Cold steel. Oh, jeez. Look how fabulous these scales are. I added some of these grips. You usually put these on pistol grips, but this aluminum is so smooth. All I wanted to talk about was, okay, that's a beveled edge right there along the edge of that scale. Look at that. That's another beveled edge. You see that along the lip? That's the inside lip. That's so when you fucking squeeze the knife and the fat of your finger squeezes in between there, you don't cut yourself. Little things let me know you care. Oh, let me hit this vape. All right, baby. I guess I'll start this thing finally. Love you too. So I'm going to be reading from an anthology of Greek drama, first series edited by C.A. Robinson Jr., Reinhardt edition. I believe this is print of 1949. So I'm just going to start with this, and I kind of broke down how I felt that Greek mythology was relevant to the talks I've been having about scripture, and not in the sense of we're going to be praying to Zeus and Poseidon or anything, but some of those moral lessons when they talk about those kind of, read them as plays, so as dramas, as soap operas, and you can relate to a lot of these key aspects. A lot of them and make note of it as we go on into this kind of talk. Uh, there's internal, there's monologue and dialogue, and you can see a lot of this spiritual tug of war that is very reminiscent of, well, the one thing that comes to mind most is the book of Lamentations in the Bible. It's just a freaking book of somebody crying in agony and pain, and just trying to overcome that and asking God about what's going on, accepting, but and overcoming it. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at. The Greek mythos is a very powerful tool in that sense, and it shouldn't be overlooked. There's aspects of the divine, God, everywhere. And God is both. It's perfect timing for this plane. It's hard for for people to grasp this. Whoa, that's how it feels sometimes. God is both everywhere and nowhere. I spoke about the story of Moses in the beginning. When he comes down from the mountain and speaks to the Israelites, he has a disclaimer. And this disclaimer is often misinterpreted. Behold, I am the Lord your God. That's the first part of it. But there's a comma. Behold, I am the Lord, comma. That's Moses speaking. This is his disclaimer. Your God who freed you from Egypt, goes on, he's separating. I am the Lord, the one in charge. Your God is the one who freed you from captivity in Egypt. This disclaimer was very important for the Israelites because what did he see when he came down? He saw them worshiping an idol. They were following Moses out of Egypt and they followed him into the desert. And as soon as he disappeared, they started worshiping that statue. That's the metaphor. But are they that silly and stupid that they just left captivity and they were following this guy and they just didn't listen and all of a sudden start worshiping a statue? But no, you have to think really, really deep. What did they cling to? They didn't have this person who provided them a lens to see scripture. So what they did was they started worshiping the messenger, Moses, and his writings. Moses, in my opinion, from what I've read and what I've gathered, is the symbolic golden calf. Because after he disappeared, they used him as a intermediary. They missed the point. They started sinning. Instead of having faith in God like he showed them, like he's reminding them, they fell to the golden calf. And that is a reoccurring theme for every prophet. Every prophet seems to be speaking on the same damn thing. People start worshiping the books and the teachings and holding that above God. And it's supposed to be like bumpers when you're bowling. You know how you keep those bumpers on? It kind of keeps you on. Like that's what it's for. But a lot of people out there literally read the book as if it's the book is written by divinely inspired people, men and women, children of God from throughout history. been vetted, and if it's in that book, it's there for a reason. But there's a lot of people who can't separate that and understand that these words we read are no different than the words that we're reading here, in a sense. And these are souls trying to navigate this life and finding that spiritual spark and chasing it, just having, well, first just hope, and then with enough hope, start to see the signs. And from there, you believe, and you just have to work on faith. So a lot of those stories in the Bible are written by those kinds of people, and it's their testimonies that are sealed away, and they can be accessed. Greek mythology, I think it gets misunderstood a lot, but it's just as valuable in that regard, because these are real people who struggled in life, and these are, well, it's mythology, right? But, you watch a soap opera and you can say, oh wow, I've seen that in real life. It's funny. It was made a show out of something I actually saw happen. It's really funny how these myths and plays and everything in between can kind of turn into, well, just are inspired by reality. So the first part, introduction. In the Persians of Achilles, the Persian queen asks a question to which no one has found the answer. What is this Athens of which all men speak of? But the foreigner who has seen the play in modern Athens and has felt the ripple of proud possession which passes over the audience at familiar lines will perhaps recognize that the answer was best suggested by the ancient playwright himself when he set the quality of Athens in the democratic spirit of her people, and let the Persian give his queen the incomprehensible response of, they bow to no man and are no man's slaves. Achilles' play commemorated the Greek triumph over predatory Persian Empire at the opening of the glorious 5th century BC. Because Athens had led the city-states of Greece during the crisis, it fell to the growing imperial democracy in all the enthusiasm of victory to bring its people to a summit of civilization never before reached by the human race. Now, under Pericles, the Parthenon and other buildings were erected. A galaxy of brilliant men thronged the violet crown city, and the drama, which in many ways represented the finest creative achievement of the Greek mind and spirit. Greek tragic drama grew out of the choral epiphany, and all through the details of its origin, although the details of its origin are obscure. It had long tradition of epic, lyric, and dramatic poetry behind it, and it was probably welded at Athens, the center of Greece, out of the diverse primitive elements. It was always associated with religion and religious ritual, yet the plays themselves are concerned fundamentally with human values, with man's dignity and his individual responsibility, with problems raised by the existence of evil, by conflicts of duty, and endurance under stress. God had been Israel's discovery, but it remained for Greece to place man in the center of things. The presence of gods or of some superhuman force in these dramas remind us, however, that man, though free, does not live unto himself alone. The plays are on the level of the universal tragedy and bear out the definition, made almost a century after the Periclean age by Aristotle in his Poetics, to the effect that the tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, while its function is, by arousing pity and fear, to provide the catharsis, or purging, of these and like emotions. The ideal tragic hero, continues Aristotle, must be a highly renowned, though a not preeminently virtuous man, whose misfortune is brought upon him by some error in judgment or frailty, rather than by vice or depravity. And so in Oedipus, the king, for example, the feelings of pity and fear are aroused by the tragic situation in which Oedipus finds himself. But with the completion of the play, the same emotions are purified in the minds and the audience by the nobility of Oedipus's conduct under stress. Still, had Aristotle lived a century earlier and had been influenced by 5th century standards, he probably would have emphasized that emotional function of tragedy was secondary to the intellectual one. The culture of the Periclean age stemmed from the belief in the comprehensive perfection of the state, to whose good and the citizens in war and in peace were to subordinate their individual interests and devote their lives. It also stemmed from traditional belief refined by an expanding intelligence and humanism, belief in the power, wisdom, and goodness of the gods, and the superiority of the fathers, the beneficence of the heroes of old. In other words, the central ideals of Hellenism embraced the city state with all of its traditional associations and responsibilities, religious, social, and civic. But during this great 5th century BC, the hereditary faith of the Greeks was being changed steadily, if slowly, by a growing individualism. Poets and sophists took the lead in questioning the problems of life and the old answers to them. And during the second half of the century, the new centrifugal tendencies struggled with the old conservatism. Sounds familiar. In a conflict fiercer and deadlier than the strife between Athenians and Spartans. Man's love of symbolism and his hope for a future life weakened the hold of traditional faith. Some people turned from the cold Olympian gods to a new mystery religion and estranged deities, the new god from Thrace, Phrygia, in the east, with their unfamiliar priests and curious rites, emotional and noisy, or the secret and mystical, brought in by swarms of foreigners and slaves. All the new religions were individualistic, and though they were scorned by the educated and conservative, they tended to weaken the position of the recognized civic cults in the community. A far more active solvent was rationalism. While treating with forbearance the myths that formed the tragic poet's stock in trade and in the background of his country's history, Euripides makes it plain that many supernatural powers traditionally assumed have no real existence. Homer made the gods responsible for good and evil acts of men, and Euripides rejects the whole theory and lays the responsibility for conduct upon the individual, while the eminent comic poet Aristophanes, in other ways conservative, ridicules the gods and their weakness. The drama thus introduced advanced ideas to a large audience. The Athenian needed the teaching and inspiration of his great poets for to meet the various requirements of citizenship in this intense democracy. For to meet the various requirements of citizenship in this intense democracy, a man had to be well educated. He began his training on a small scale in the deme, the administrative district, where local affairs were freely discussed in a town meeting and where local offices gave some practice in communal management. Further experience he gained in one or more of the many administrative offices of the state and empire, and in the assembly and law courts. But this practical instruction was narrow. The Athenian received a broader education from the choral songs at festivals and particularly from the drama presented in the theater. During the year, more than 60 days were given to festivals, including dramatic expeditions and the holiday of Demes. Every year, moreover, from 1 to 2,000 boys and men appeared before the public in choruses for the dramatic and other exhibitions that required them. These choral services, as well as others, were generally rotated among the qualified citizens, thus giving all, or nearly all, a training in music and a close contact with literature. The majority of the dramatists spoke of their fellow citizens in the 5th century Athens are irretrievably lost. Others are known to us only by name. Those who have survived are represented by a mere fraction of their total production, and in spite of the loss of so many masterpieces, 3 of the 4 greatest tragedians in history are Greeks. The earliest of these, Achilles, 525 to 456 BC, was born near Athens in Eleusis. Eleusis, which is the home of the official mysteries. A fact that doubtless made a lifelong impression on but most of the creative Athenian dramatists. Achilles desired above all else to be considered a loyal citizen who had fought for his country at the marathon. He belonged to the generation of the Persian Wars. In his day, the man indeed was greater than the artist, and almost in spite of himself that we describe him as a literary man. Nevertheless, in his hands, the drama became a new and fully developed art that was cast off all of the traces of its primitive beginning. I can go on. Let me know in the comments if you want me to. I was going to save my little ramble for, I suppose, now, but I did it before in the introduction. So I think that when I start talking about other books and why I've come to the realizations that I have, I believe that the path is a little more level and you can understand. I'm not trying to convert anybody. Fuck that. Fuck that. But when you're sincere about something, when you find something true, you want to show it to the people you love. And it's not saying that I have love for humanity in this world. I care more about the environment than the EPA. But it's not something that you just keep inside. Otherwise, you end up like Jonah, right? You gotta fuck that. You gotta listen. So take it for what you will. Going forward, I'm going to be speaking on this a lot more, cross-referencing different faiths because God speaks to everyone. Everyone gets a little crazy sometimes. It's best not to pick a side when God is on the line, I guess. I'm talking about picking a side with which building you're going to align yourself to. Use your ears. Use your eyes. And glory be to God. Thanks for watching.